So, get this. Picture a small Spanish village, right? Belmez de la Moraleda, back in 1971. We're not talking, smartphones and the internet here. This is rural Spain. Franco's still in charge.
Right, right.
And in this, totally normal farmhouse, something really weird supposedly starts happening.
Okay.
Faces.
Faces.
Yeah, faces. But, they're appearing on the concrete floor.
On the floor?
Yeah, and not like someone painted them on or anything. It's like they're part of the concrete itself.
Wow. See, that's what's so fascinating about this. They weren't just faint stains or anything. People who saw them, they described them as being really clear and distinct. Some even said they looked like children's faces. And they had these, big kind of creepy eyes.
Oh.
And what's even wilder is that later on, scientists actually analyzed the concrete, and they confirmed that the images weren't painted or applied in any way. It was like something was going on within the structure of the concrete itself.
So strange. I was reading some of the firsthand accounts you sent over, and some people even said the faces were, raised up a little.
Yeah, like bas relief.
Exactly, like a few millimeters thick.
It's wild. And, of course, word gets out, right? So imagine this. You have this sleepy little village that's suddenly become, the center of this global phenomenon.
I bet everyone's talking about it.
Oh, yeah. Huge crowds, international press. Everyone's got a theory. Some people are saying it's, ghosts. Others are saying it has to be a hoax.
Right.
But this is where it gets really interesting. And a little bit creepy, honestly. Because the Spanish government, they step in. And they're not messing around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And to really understand why they reacted the way they did, we have to remember what Spain was like back then, in the 1970s.
Right. It was still Franco's regime.
Exactly. They were known for keeping a tight lid on anything that could rock the boat, information, public perception, all of that. And they saw this whole unexplained face thing as a potential threat.
Okay, so walk me through this. What did they actually do? Did they, send in the secret police or something?
Well, not exactly, but close.
Okay.
From what I've gathered, they put something into motion that's been called Operation Trident.
Operation Trident.
Yeah. It seems like it was a coordinated effort to discredit the whole Belmez thing. Yeah. And they used a few different tactics. Putting pressure on local officials, using the church's authority, even trying to control what the media was saying.
Wow, a three-pronged attack. Like a trident. Okay, so break it down for me. What do you mean by pressure on local officials?
Well, take the town's mayor, for example, Manuel Rodriguez Rivas.
Okay.
They called him to Madrid to meet with the Minister of the Interior himself, Tomás Garicano Goñi.
Oh, wow. Serious stuff.
Yeah. And according to what we know, it wasn't exactly a friendly little chap. The sources I've seen say that Rivas was threatened, told that he'd lose his position if he didn't publicly say the faces were fake.
Wow.
And it wasn't just that. There were even hints that they could make up some scandal about him, ruin his reputation.
So it was basically toe the line or else. And what about the church? How did they get involved in all of this?
Well, you have to remember that the Catholic Church had a ton of influence in Spain back then. And there were worries that people might see the faces as some kind of, holy event.
Right, like a miracle or something.
Yeah, specifically a Marian apparition, an appearance of the Virgin Mary.
Right, and the church definitely wouldn't want some unauthorized miracle popping up.
Exactly, and it seems like they were under pressure from the government to maintain control over that kind of thing.
You mentioned that Franco's wife, Carmen Polo, was involved somehow.
Yeah, she actually visited Belmez herself.
No way.
Yeah. Now, what exactly she did there isn't totally clear, but some people think she was there to see if there was any real religious significance to the faces.
Interesting. So she was maybe there to assess the situation for the church and the regime.
Possibly. But even at the local level, it seems the church was involved. There are reports that the priest in Belmez was pressured by the bishop to denounce the faces.
Wow, so they were really trying to shut this whole thing down. So you got the government flexing its muscles and the church worried about its image. Who else got caught up in this?
Well, the third part of this whole Operation Trident thing was the media.
Ah, right, controlling the narrative.
Exactly. There was one journalist, Antonio Casado, who wrote for the newspaper Pueblo, and he was basically forced to publish an article saying the faces were fake.
Wait, hold on. Forced. How do you force a journalist to write something they don't believe?
Well, it turns out Casado later admitted that he'd been pressured by his editor, who, surprise, surprise, was taking orders directly from the government.
Classic.
It was a total publish this or else situation.
Man, the lengths they went to just to bury this story. Makes you wonder what they were so afraid of, you know? If it was just a harmless prank, why not let it fade away?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like this whole orchestrated cover-up seems way too intense for what it was supposed to be.
It's almost like they made the whole thing a bigger deal by trying to hide it.
Right. It just makes you wonder what they were so scared of. It's already kind of sus that you've got, like, government higher-ups sticking their noses into this whole face thing, right?
Right.
Trying to make it all go away. But then things get even weirder. So while all this is happening with the government and the church, there are these workers doing some renovations at the farmhouse.
Okay.
Totally unrelated to the faces, it seems. And they stumble across something totally unexpected.
Oh, man. This is where it gets really creepy.
Yeah.
They found bones, right?
Yeah. Human bones.
Under the floorboards or something.
Buried right there under the floor of the house.
No way.
And it wasn't just like one or two bones. We're talking like skeletal remains.
See, that's the thing that really gets me about all this. Even if I wanted to be skeptical about the whole faces appearing thing, you can't deny there are bones under the floor. That's not a hoax.
No.
And the fact that they were children's bones, it's just, I don't know, it's just eerie.
It really adds this whole other level to the Belmez case, It makes it darker. And some of the things I read about what happened when they found the bones, it's unsettling. Like there were workers who they refused to keep digging once they found the bones.
Wow, really?
They were creeped out, especially by the fact that none of the skeletons had skulls.
It's like something out of a horror movie.
Right.
You've got these faces that just appear out of nowhere, and then you discover the remains of children buried in the very same spot.
Yeah.
It's almost too much of a coincidence,
I know, right? And believe it or not, it doesn't stop there.
Why? There's more.
Oh, yeah. Like the faces and the bones weren't enough. There's another piece to this whole thing that always sends shivers down my spine.
The recordings, right?
Yes.
The psychophonies? You sent some of those over, and listening to those, I'll be honest, it creeped me out. But before we get into the specific recordings, can you back up a little bit for anyone who might not know? What exactly is a psychophony?
Sure. Basically, it's a sound or sometimes a voice that's thought to be, paranormal. Like it's a recording of something from beyond the grave.
Okay.
And I know that might sound kind of out there, but people have been researching and investigating this kind of stuff for a long time.
Interesting.
And when you think about the Belmez case and everything else going on there,
yeah,
those recordings become even more unsettling.
Absolutely. So let's hear them. You sent over 3 different examples, right?
Right.
Do you want to start with the first?
Sure. This one supposedly captured the sound of, children crying inside the house.
A haunting chorus of faint cries and whimpers, punctuated by a woman's distressed voice asking in Spanish, "Pero por qué gritaban esos niños?"
Right.
Translation. But why were those children screaming?
Okay, yeah, so it's faint.
Right.
But yeah, you can definitely hear it.
Yeah.
And when you hear that woman's voice asking why the children are screaming, and you remember they found those bones?
Yeah.
Man, it's just the creepiest thing. Honestly, it's stuff like that, those little details, that really gets to me.
Right. It's like every part of this story just adds to how unsettling and mysterious the whole thing is. But that was just the first recording. The second one is pretty different.
Oh, yeah, this one. This one is less about the sound itself and more about the feeling you get when you hear it.
Yeah.
Like you get this weird sense that someone or something is trying to tell you something.
It's true. This one is super short, but you can totally hear a voice. A lot of people say it's like metallic or something, and it's just saying one word.
A clear, slightly distorted voice saying Angela.
Angela. Man, even just hearing that sends shivers down my spine.
Right.
It's so short, but there's something about how it's said.
Right.
Like it's not just a name, but some kind of statement.
It's interesting you say that. It's like they're presenting the name, like an introduction almost.
Yeah, like an introduction. Okay. And we've got one more recording, right?
One more.
And this next one is, well, let's just say it's not for the faint of heart. Okay, you know what? I need a second to process all this before we hear that last recording.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about children's bones buried under this house.
Right.
Their faces are appearing in the concrete, and now we're listening to these weird voices.
Yeah.
And one of them is saying a name. It's a lot.
It really is. Like each piece of this is creepy enough on its own, but when you put it all together, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
Sure. And then that last recording.
Right. They say it's a man's voice this time, and yeah, it's chilling.
A deep guttural voice saying, "Matar a él." Translation, Kill him.
Kill him. Okay, yeah, that's not right.
Oh.
I'm getting chills. You know, some people, listen to ocean waves or nature sounds to relax.
Right.
But this is something else.
Totally different vibe.
So you mentioned before that even scientists from the CSIC, that's Spain's big science research council, they got involved with this, right?
They did.
What did they think? Did they just write the whole thing off as a hoax?
Well, they mainly focused on the faces themselves, trying to figure out what they were.
Okay.
And what they found out is actually pretty interesting. They were able to say, definitively, that no one used paint or dyes or anything to make the faces.
So they weren't painted on, they weren't burned on?
Nope.
Nothing from the outside was used to make them?
Exactly.
So does that mean, that kind of proves it wasn't a hoax then, right? At least not the faces.
You'd think so, right. But the scientists, they couldn't explain what was going on. They knew that something weird was happening with the concrete itself, but they didn't have an answer for how or why.
Huh.
And that's what I think is so fascinating. You have scientists basically saying, yeah, something weird is happening here, but we don't know what it is.
It's true. It's like it challenges everything we think we know about how the world works, which is probably why this whole case has fascinated people for so long.
Yeah.
It's like one of those magic tricks where there has to be some explanation, but you just can't figure it out.
It's a good analogy.
And speaking of things that seem impossible, you've got to tell me more about that sealed room experiment.
Oh, right. So that was back in 1972, and there were still a lot of people who thought the faces were fake. So they decided to bring in a notary, a guy named Antonio Palacios, to supervise this whole experiment in the kitchen of the farmhouse.
Okay, now for those of us who aren't experts on, Spanish legal stuff, what exactly does a notary do?
Basically, they're like an official witness. Their whole job is to make sure that documents and transactions and stuff are all legit, no funny business. So to have a notary involved in all this, it was a big deal.
Got it. So they've got this notary guy. What do? Do they, seal up the kitchen?
Pretty much. They went all out, sealed the doors with lead, covered the floor with plastic.
Wow.
They even had people watching the room 24/7.
No way. It's like they were making a movie or something.
Right. And their whole goal was to eliminate any chance that someone could mess with the experiment,
Yeah.
They wanted to prove, without a doubt, whether the faces were real or just some kind of trick. So they sealed it all up, and then they waited.
For how long?
3 months?
3 months.
3 months.
I can't even imagine the suspense, waiting to find out what happened or didn't happen in that room. So what did they find?
16 new faces.
Get out. You're kidding. Right. 16 new faces just appeared in a sealed room.
That's what they say.
What did the notary say?
If you listen to recordings of his statement afterward, you can hear it in his voice. He's astonished. He says, point blank, that there's no way anyone tampered with anything.
And he saw it with his own eyes.
He was there for the whole thing.
Wow. You'd think that would be it, Case closed.
Right. But even after all that, the notary statement, the documentation, all of it, it was never really made public.
Seriously, why not?
It's almost like the government's attempts to bury the story actually worked.
Wow. It's like something out of a conspiracy movie.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did people just forget about the Faces of Belmez?
Not quite. People kept talking about it, speculating. And then in the 90s, everyone got interested in the case all over again.
Because of the internet.
Well, that and technology had advanced a lot. They had new ways of analyzing audio recordings.
Ah, so they could get a better listen to those psychophonies.
Exactly. They could remove all the background noise, isolate voices, and they started noticing things they hadn't heard before.
Wow. I don't even know what to say. New faces appearing, those recordings, the scientists, the government cover-up, the fact that it's still happening. What's the answer?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Despite everything, we still don't have a real explanation for the Faces of Belmez. They're still a mystery. It's kind of humbling,
How so?
We like to think we have it all figured out, but then you have something like this, and it throws everything we think we know out the window.
It makes you think, that's for sure. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive, but to our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this. After diving into the story with us, the government cover-up, those creepy voices, the science that makes it more mysterious instead of less, the fact that those faces are still appearing even today, what do you believe? What are the Faces of Belmez?